Good afternoon, everyone. This is Father Eric Nielsen, and as we get ready for the Feast of Christ the King, which is also known as Regnum Christi Day, I just wanted to give a very simple reflection on what Regnum Christi Day is about, what the Feast of Christ the King is about, and why it's important to us. If you read the book by Pope Benedict the 16th, Jesus of Nazareth, one of the most interesting sections, I think, is when he discusses the term Kingdom of God. And in the book, he goes through this really deep analysis, and he comes up with 5 or 6 different ways that the kingdom of God can be interpreted. Is it the church? Does it mean the fullness of the kingdom of God in heaven? The person of Jesus himself? Us building the kingdom of God in society? Does the kingdom of God take place in the soul, for example? What exactly does the kingdom of God mean? Because it seems to be all these different things at once. When we celebrate the Feast of Christ the King, in Regnum Christi, there's 2 areas I'd like to focus on especially. One is, what about the kingdom of God? How does it affect my soul? What's going on inside of me? Allowing the kingdom of God to permeate me on the inside so that Christ is really my king. And then once Christ becomes my king, therefore to go out into society. Well, what does it mean? We could ask ourselves, why is it even relevant? Because that's a question I think so many of our young people especially have today. Why is it even relevant to let Christ be my king? In a certain sense, what do I get out of it? If you want a really short answer, I would say the following. Christ himself said in the gospel, I came that they may have life and have it to the full. So Christ is not some sort of limiting factor to our happiness. If Christ asks us to live lives of holiness, it's not so that we can be limited. It's precisely so that we can have joy, so we can have fullness, we can have plenitude. And this, in other words, so that we can be free. If you look at yourselves, if any one of us look at ourselves, we would say, what are the things that make me unhappy? Well, essentially, those things that make me unhappy are my limitations. Those forms of slavery that keep pulling me down. My sins that I just can't seem to break. And therefore I go to other things in order to try to fill that hole in my heart, precisely because I've got these wounds in there. And what Christ wants to do is he wants to heal our hearts. He wants to be our fulfillment. And that's why when you look at the lives of saints, for example, St. John Paul II, how many times do you look at pictures of him and he is full of joy? And not only he is full of joy, but the people that he's around become transfixed and they become full of joy just by being in his presence. This is what it means to have the kingdom of Christ in our hearts. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the statutes of the Regnum Christi Federation number 13, they give us 2 different sections. It says, we clothe ourselves with Christ in our hearts and in our works, so that he reigns in our lives through a progressive configuration with him. What does that mean basically? Clothing ourselves with Christ, imitation of Christ, trying to live the virtues, and putting into practice, if you want, practical ascesis, prayers, works of mercy, practical living of the holy life, which is putting on Christ, being clothed by Christ, kind of something external to us, so that bit by bit he will transform us into ourselves, into himself, configuration with Christ. And when we have that, that is when the kingdom of Christ truly reigns in our heart. That is when we will truly be filled with peace and joy. And that is when we will be able to bring that kingdom to others. God bless. I look forward to seeing you on Regnum Christi Day, and you're in my prayers.